I have not lived as a woman. I have lived as a man.
How?
And in a few, well, I've just done what I damn well wanted to, and I made enough money to support myself.
We have corroboration in the movie for Hepburn's lesbianism. Liz Smith, who was the greatest gossip columnist and very respected, truthful journalist, knew Hepburn very well and confirms that she had lesbian relationships.
The press did find out that you'd been married, and you said you'd forgotten. Had you really forgotten?
No, of course not. I just thought it was none of their business. And I still think, personal things and nobody's...
Katherine Hepburn lived a double life, and she got away with it. From the legendary romance with Spencer Tracy that Hollywood carefully orchestrated,
Oh, I knew you'd come, Doc.
to the secret relationships with women that biographers would spend decades trying to uncover.
We have corroboration in the movie for Hepburn's lesbianism. Liz Smith, who was the greatest gossip columnist and very respected, truthful journalist, knew Hepburn very well and confirms that she had lesbian relationships.
This wasn't just about protecting a star's reputation. According to insiders, this was about concealing the truth behind one of Hollywood's most carefully crafted illusions that helped both stars hide who they truly were. So, let's get into it. Katherine Hepburn's double life began long before Hollywood, rooted in a tragedy that would shape every decision she made for the rest of her existence. The morning of March 30th, 1921, transformed a confident 13-year-old girl into someone who would spend her entire life playing roles both on and off the screen. Hepburn and her 15-year-old brother Tom were visiting a family friend's home in New York City's Greenwich Village over the Easter weekend. Tom was her closest companion, the person she admired most in the world, and they had spent the previous day together exploring the city and attending a performance that left them both deeply affected by its tragic themes. The next morning, Hepburn went to wake her brother in the attic storage room, where he had been sleeping. What she discovered would haunt her for the next 82 years of her life. Tom was hanging from a noose made of torn sheeting, his body suspended by a curtain tie wrapped around a ceiling beam. The teenage Hepburn somehow found the strength to cut her brother down from the beam and lay him on the bed. She ran frantically to a doctor's house next door, pounding on the door and telling the housekeeper that her brother was dead. The housekeeper's cold response, "Then the doctor can't help him, can he?" Before slamming the door in her face became another traumatic memory, layered on top of the horror she had just witnessed. Her parents arrived from Connecticut, and the body was immediately cremated in New Jersey. Dr. Thomas Hepburn, Katherine's domineering father, made a harsh public statement insisting that Tom's death was the result of a foolish stunt, an experiment gone wrong, not a suicide. The family would maintain this fiction publicly for decades. The Hepburn family's response to Tom's death revealed their approach to tragedy and scandal: deny, suppress, and never discuss. Dr. Hepburn told his remaining children not to think or talk about Tom, acting as if he had never existed. Everyone adhered to these rules except Katherine, who made a private pledge that would define her entire existence. In her autobiography written 70 years later, Hepburn revealed her secret vow. "I pledged to Tom and myself that he would live in my heart and mind as long as I lived. I decided I had to live my life for two. The real date of his death would not be until the day I died." Hepburn immediately abandoned her own identity in favor of her brother's. She took November 8th, Tom's birthday, as her own, using it for the next 7 decades. She shaved her head and began dressing exclusively in boys' clothing, calling herself Jimmy, and refusing to answer to Katherine.
I have not lived as a woman. I have lived as a man.
How?
And in a few, well, I've just done what I damn well wanted to, and I made enough money to support myself.
She dropped out of school, became moody and suspicious of people, and withdrew from children her age. The transformation was complete. Katherine Hepburn ceased to exist as the person she had been and became instead a surrogate for her lost brother, living the rebellious, unconventional life that Tom had been denied. Her parents, particularly her father, encouraged this metamorphosis, essentially replacing their dead son with their daughter in a psychological arrangement that was profoundly disturbing. The suicide was actually part of a pattern in the Hepburn family that no one wanted to acknowledge. Tom's death was one in a series of suicides that included Dr. Hepburn's brother Charlie, who jumped from a window in 1915 and impaled himself on a picket fence, and Katherine's maternal grandfather, who had also taken his own life decades earlier. Biographers would later argue that this childhood trauma drove Hepburn's attraction to dark, self-destructive men throughout her life, particularly director John Ford and actor Spencer Tracy, both alcoholics battling their own demons. She was trying to save them in ways she hadn't been able to save Tom, replaying the tragedy over and over, always hoping for a different ending. The relationship between Katherine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy became Hollywood legend, celebrated as one of cinema's greatest love stories. A passionate 26-year affair between two brilliant actors who couldn't marry because of his Catholic faith and commitment to his family. But the reality behind their famous relationship was far more complex than the public ever suspected. The pair starred in 9 films together and maintained what became known as an open secret in Hollywood, a relationship that supposedly lasted from 1941 until Tracy's death in 1967. The setup seemed perfect for the gossip magazines and fan clubs who wanted to believe in true love conquering all obstacles.
Oh, I knew you'd come, Doc.
Tracy remained married to his wife Louise throughout his entire relationship with Hepburn, maintaining separate residences with the actress while spending weekends with his family. The arrangement appeared to be driven by his Catholic faith and devotion to his family, particularly his deaf son John, for whom he and Louise had established a clinic and school. Gene Kelly recalled seeing them together at the MGM studio during lunch breaks, sitting on a bench holding hands while everyone left them alone in their private world. These public displays seemed to confirm the passionate romance that everyone wanted to believe in. The devoted mistress caring for her tortured genius who couldn't leave his family.
He and Hepburn had a kind of magic together, and again, as you said, Walter and I loving each other as guys comes through. They were in love.
But the relationship's true nature was far more complicated and perhaps entirely different from what the world believed. According to Hollywood fixer Scotty Bowers, who provided sexual partners to countless closeted stars for decades, the Tracy Hepburn romance was the greatest cover story in Hollywood history, a mutually beneficial arrangement designed to protect both stars from career-ending exposure. Bowers claimed in his controversial memoir and subsequent documentary that he arranged female sexual partners for Hepburn over the course of nearly 40 years, describing her preferences and regular requests for women. Even more explosive was his claim of having sexual encounters with Tracy himself, suggesting that both stars were hiding their true sexual orientations behind the facade of their legendary affair.
The secretaries of Cukor confirmed that Tracy was having a relationship with Scotty.
The bombshell allegations suggested that what the world saw as Hollywood's greatest romance was actually an elaborate arrangement designed to protect both stars from career-ending exposure in an era when homosexuality could destroy everything they had built. The setup was brilliant in its simplicity. Tracy's inability to divorce because of his Catholicism provided the perfect excuse for why they couldn't marry, while their public devotion to each other deflected any questions about their private lives. Longtime gossip columnist and Hepburn friend Liz Smith confirmed on camera for the first time in the Scotty Bowers documentary that Hepburn had relationships with women throughout her life. Smith's revelation came decades after both Hepburn and Tracy had died, finally admitting what many in Hollywood had long suspected but never dared to say publicly. The relationship dynamics that people witnessed on set told a very different story than the romantic legend. Tracy was often cruel to Hepburn, mocking her educated speech by saying she talked like you've got a feather up your ass all the time.
I think he thought I was awful. And he said she has dirty fingernails, her hands dirty, and she's bossy.
He never told her he loved her, took her devotion for granted, and regularly disappeared on drinking binges that could last for weeks. Hepburn would sleep outside Tracy's hotel room during these binges, waiting for him to emerge so she could care for him. She abandoned major career opportunities to nursemaid him through his self-pitying, drunken episodes, sacrificing her own work to enable his dysfunction. For someone as fiercely independent and ambitious as Hepburn supposedly was, This level of subjugation seemed completely out of character, unless the relationship served a purpose beyond romance. When Tracy died at Hepburn's cottage in 1967, she was the one who called his wife Louise to inform her. The two women had maintained a strange relationship throughout the affair, with Louise apparently accepting the arrangement and even reaching out to Hepburn after Tracy's death to maintain their connection.
So I put on my slippers and robe and went out to the kitchen, and as I was standing before the kitchen door, I heard a clunk in the other room, and Spencer was dead. He'd fallen down near the stove and was just...
Tracy's children also formed lasting friendships with Hepburn, suggesting a family dynamic far more complex than a simple case of a devoted mistress and a guilty husband. Even in her own autobiography written nearly a quarter century after Tracy's death, Hepburn devoted only a few paragraphs to their love affair while discussing their working relationship at length. For someone supposedly engaged in the love story of the century, her reticence was notable and perhaps revealing. Hepburn's private life included relationships that she went to extraordinary lengths to conceal from the public, maintaining friendships and connections that biographers would later describe in very different terms than the actress herself ever publicly acknowledged. Her longtime assistant and companion, Phyllis Wilbourn, lived with Hepburn for decades after they met in the 1950s. When Wilbourn died in 1995, she wasn't buried with her own family, but was instead interred alongside Hepburn's relatives in the family plot. The nature of their relationship remained deliberately ambiguous throughout both their lives. Biographer A. Scott Berg recalled a conversation where Hepburn referred to Wilbourn as "my Alice B. Toklas," a reference to Gertrude Stein's famous female partner, though Wilbourn immediately and forcefully objected to the comparison. The exchange revealed the careful dance around truth that defined Hepburn's private life, acknowledging reality in coded language while maintaining plausible deniability. The Alice B. Toklas reference was particularly telling because Toklas and Stein's relationship, while never explicitly confirmed by the women themselves during Stein's lifetime, was widely understood in artistic circles. By invoking that comparison, Hepburn was essentially outing herself to those who understood the reference, while maintaining cover for those who didn't.
I was her lover and she was mine. It was a sultry day in Paris the day we met. A coup de foudre.
Scotty Bowers provided detailed accounts of arranging female partners for Hepburn throughout her career, describing her preferences and the frequency of these encounters. According to Bowers, Hepburn maintained relationships with multiple women over the years, while presenting the Tracy romance as her primary emotional attachment. The Hollywood fixer's claims were initially dismissed by many as the fabrications of an elderly man seeking attention and profit from salacious stories about dead celebrities who couldn't defend themselves. However, the corroboration from Liz Smith and other sources lent credibility to his account, suggesting that Bowers was finally revealing truths that Hollywood had successfully suppressed for decades. Hepburn's relationships with several women in Hollywood were conducted with extreme discretion, but left traces that careful observers could detect. Her living arrangements often included female companions whose exact role in her life remained undefined, described in vague terms as assistants, secretaries, or close friends. The actress's fierce protection of her privacy extended far beyond normal celebrity boundaries. She refused almost all press interviews, wouldn't discuss her personal life, even in the most general terms, and maintained complete control over her image and the information released about her. This level of secrecy suggested someone with secrets far more dangerous than a conventional love affair with a married man.
The press did find out that you'd been married, and you said you'd forgotten. Had you really forgotten?
No, of course not. I just thought it was none of their business. And I still think, personal things and nobody...
When Hepburn did appear in Paris in 1934 with her friend Susan Steele, critics described her as alienating audiences with her eccentric approach to gender, sexuality, and stardom. She lived with Laura Harding, a wealthy socialite, for years during the 1930s, refusing to let publicists link her romantically with men and fueling rumors that she was a lesbian. The relationship with Harding was particularly significant because it occurred during Hepburn's rise to stardom, when studios typically arrange publicity romances and marriages to establish their stars' heterosexual credentials. Hepburn's refusal to play along with this system and her insistence on living with a woman marked her as dangerously unconventional. Hepburn's preference for wearing trousers became one of her most famous characteristics, celebrated decades later as pioneering feminist fashion. But in the 1930s, her insistence on wearing pants was read by Hollywood and the public as something far more dangerous than a mere fashion choice. It was a declaration of gender nonconformity that threatened fundamental social orders. Women were expected to wear skirts or dresses in public during this era. Wearing pants was associated with lesbianism, masculinity, and a rejection of traditional femininity that made both studios and audiences deeply uncomfortable. Hepburn's determination to wear trousers, despite intense pressure to conform, marked her as someone willing to risk her career for the freedom to present herself as she chose.
I've done what I damn well wanted to, and I made enough money to support myself. And I ain't afraid of being alone.
Is that why also you wear pants?
No, I just wear pants because they're comfortable.
Do you ever wear a skirt, by the way?
I have one.
You have one.
Wear it to your funeral.
Studios tried everything to force Hepburn into dresses. RKO famously stole her pants from her dressing room, hiding them in an attempt to make her wear more conventional clothing. Hepburn's response became Hollywood legend. She walked around the studio lot in her underwear, refusing to put anything else on until her pants were returned to her. The incident demonstrated both Hepburn's iron will and the extremes she would go to in order to maintain control over her appearance. Most actresses would have capitulated rather than risk offense to studio executives and crew members, but Hepburn seemed willing to sacrifice everything rather than compromise on this issue. Costume designer Edith Head observed that working with Hepburn was different from working with any other actress. "One does not design for Miss Hepburn," Head explained. "One designs with her. She's a real professional, and she has very definite feelings about what things are right for her, whether it has to do with costumes, scripts, or her entire lifestyle." Hepburn's involvement in her costumes went far beyond normal actor input. She provided detailed notes about colors, fabrics, and cuts, always insisting on clothing that allowed her to move freely and feel comfortable. For someone who had grown up wanting to be a boy and calling herself Jimmy, the freedom to wear pants represented something fundamental to her identity. Director George Stevens, who worked with Hepburn on several films, remarked, "Kate was the first blue jeans woman. How she anticipated this era today, I don't know, but she wore blue jeans and it was unheard of, and a sweater, and she's a grand dame of a studio." The public reaction to Hepburn's pants wearing varied from confusion to hostility. American audiences in the 1930s weren't sure what to make of a leading lady who dressed like a man and acted with such flagrant disregard for feminine conventions. The press published lengthy articles questioning the Hollywood women who chose to wear men's clothes, treating it as a moral issue rather than a fashion preference. Hepburn herself was acutely aware of how her appearance affected public perception. In a 1986 interview with the New York Times, she acknowledged, "In England, I'm sure they didn't think anything at all. In California, I think they just thought I was queer." Her use of the word queer, which in that era specifically meant homosexual, suggested that Hepburn understood exactly what signal she was sending by wearing pants and presenting in such a masculine manner. The comment revealed a self-awareness that she was being read as a lesbian, and that she had chosen to dress that way anyway. The famous quote she delivered to Barbara Walters about wearing pants demonstrated her defiant attitude towards social expectations. When Walters asked about skirts, Hepburn responded with barely concealed contempt that she owned one skirt that she would wear to your funeral. The aggressive edge to the comment suggested deep feelings about being forced into feminine clothing. Later in the same interview, Hepburn made an even more revealing statement. "I have not lived as a woman. I have lived as a man. I've just done what I damn well wanted to and made enough money to support myself. and I ain't afraid of being alone. The declaration that she had lived as a man, not as a woman, suggested something far more profound than simple career independence. Hepburn was describing a fundamental rejection of the female role as it was defined in her era, claiming instead a masculine prerogative to live according to her own desires without fear of consequences. While the Tracy relationship dominated public perception of Hepburn's romantic life, another affair revealed a very different side of her capacity for passion and the pain of thwarted desire. Director John Ford, legendary for his westerns and masculine sensibilities, fell deeply in love with Hepburn during the filming of Mary of Scotland in 1936. And that love apparently lasted until his death nearly 4 decades later. Ford, married with 2 children and a devout Catholic, was an unlikely match for Hepburn. Known for his cranky demeanor, his heavy drinking, and his preference for working with male actors, Ford initially seemed to have little in common with the iconoclastic actress. But Hepburn had always done well with difficult men, and her ability to make Ford laugh and lighten his dark moods created a connection neither of them expected.
I think we had fundamental respect for each other. And I think that is the most lasting quality in the world. I think
and the fact that you beat the hell out of me at golf.
The relationship began during pre-production on Mary of Scotland, when Ford was immediately entranced by Hepburn's feistiness and irreverence. Unlike other actresses who cowered before his famous temper, Hepburn laughed in his face when he raged, made jokes that diffused his anger, and treated him with a casual disrespect that somehow won his devotion. Screenwriter Dudley Nichols witnessed their dynamic on set and used it as the basis for the relationship between Katherine Hepburn and Cary Grant's characters in Bringing Up Baby. The interplay between Susan's breezy, careless certainty and David's cranky muttering was lifted directly from watching Ford and Hepburn interact during the filming of Mary of Scotland.
I wish to thank you for the welcome you have given me, my lords. I've been 13 years away. It was not a...
By the time filming wrapped in April 1936, Ford was completely in love with Hepburn. They traveled together to New York, where she discussed potential stage projects, and then on to Connecticut to visit her family. According to multiple accounts, they did not consummate their relationship at this point because Ford wanted everything. He wanted a divorce from his wife. He wanted to marry Hepburn. He wanted a complete new life with her. But Ford's Catholic faith and his wife Mary's determination to fight for her marriage created an impossible situation. Ford vacillated between leaving his family and maintaining his marriage, unable to make a choice that would resolve the situation. Meanwhile, Hepburn's career was beginning its slide into the box office poison era, and her lover Leland Hayward abandoned her both personally and professionally. Lonely and frustrated by Ford's inability to commit, Hepburn began dating Howard Hughes in January 1937. When the stage production of Jane Eyre closed in Baltimore, she sailed to Nassau with Hughes, attempting to move on from Ford. But when they returned in May, Ford still hadn't made any decisions about his marriage, leaving Hepburn in an emotional limbo. The relationship remained unresolved when Ford joined the Army and disappeared from Hollywood for 4 years during World War II. By the time he returned, Hepburn had begun her public relationship with Spencer Tracy, effectively ending any chance that she and Ford would be together.
Thank you, madam. You slay me.
But the feelings apparently never died. Decades later, in 1973, biographer Dan Ford brought Hepburn to visit his grandfather, John Ford, who was dying and in poor health. Ford's grandson was taping the visit and left the recorder running when he went to his car to retrieve something, inadvertently capturing a private moment between the former lovers. In the stolen recording, Hepburn tells Ford to rest and promises she'll return to visit him. Ford responds simply, "Okay, I love you." And Hepburn replies, "The feeling is mutual." The bittersweet exchange, private and heartbreaking, revealed a depth of emotion that neither had ever publicly acknowledged about the other. John Ford died in August of that same year. Biographer Barbara Leeming would later argue that Ford, not Tracy, was the great love of Katherine Hepburn's life, that Tracy's relationship with her was built on her need to care for damaged men, while Ford's love for her was based on genuine understanding and appreciation of who she actually was. The fact that Hepburn never had the life with Ford that he wanted, that she instead spent decades in the half-relationship with Tracy, suggested that perhaps she had chosen safety and cover over genuine passion. The Tracy arrangement allowed her to maintain her secret life while presenting a heterosexual image to the world, while a marriage to Ford would have required her to be someone she fundamentally was not. In May 1938, the Independent Theater Owners Association took out a full-page advertisement in the Hollywood Reporter with the headline, "Wake up, Hollywood producers." The ad blasted studios for making big-budget flops with overpaid stars, whose dramatic ability is unquestioned, but whose box office draw is nil. Among the stars specifically named as box office poison was Katherine Hepburn. The designation was devastating. At 31 years old, Hepburn went from being one of Hollywood's brightest stars to someone no studio wanted to hire. She had won an Academy Award just 5 years earlier for Morning Glory and had starred in the massive hit Little Women. But a series of commercial failures had turned the industry against her.
And I'll come by in the morning.
Okay.
Okay.
I love you.
It's mutual.
Films that failed weren't necessarily bad. Bringing Up Baby is now considered one of the greatest screwball comedies ever made, and Holiday is regarded as a romantic comedy classic. But audiences stayed away from theaters when Hepburn's name was on the marquee, and the industry blamed her personally for the losses. The problem wasn't just the films themselves, but everything Hepburn represented. Her trousers, her refusal to play the Hollywood publicity game, her casual disregard for reporters and fans, her eccentric approach to gender, sexuality, and stardom. All of it had created a public image that alienated the very audiences who were supposed to buy tickets to her movies. David O. Selznick's memo about why Hepburn wasn't right for the role of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind revealed Hollywood's assessment of her problems. I think Hepburn has two strikes against her. First, the unquestionable and very widespread intense public dislike of her at the moment. And second, the fact that she is yet to demonstrate that she possesses the qualities which are probably the most important of all the many requisites of Scarlett. The intense public dislike Selznick referenced wasn't just about failed movies. It was about Hepburn's refusal to perform femininity in the ways that audiences expected from their female stars. She wouldn't wear makeup. She wouldn't give interviews. She wouldn't pretend to be available romantically to male fans. She wouldn't conform to any of the expectations that defined female stardom. When the box office Poison label hit, Hepburn bought out her RKO contract and fled back to Connecticut to regroup with her family. It was during this summer that she would begin strategizing her comeback, working with playwright Philip Barry to create The Philadelphia Story, a play designed specifically to rehabilitate her image and prove to Hollywood that she could be the kind of star audiences wanted. But before that triumphant return, Hepburn had to survive the 1938 New England hurricane, which demolished her beloved family home in Fenwick. The physical destruction mirrored the professional devastation she was experiencing, leaving her to rebuild both her house and her career from the ruins. The Philadelphia Story represented one of the most carefully orchestrated comebacks in Hollywood history, a masterclass in image rehabilitation that required Hepburn to acknowledge and correct everything the public had found objectionable about her, while maintaining enough of her essential personality to remain interesting. Playwright Philip Barry wrote the role of Tracy Lord specifically for Hepburn after the two had worked together successfully on Holiday. The character was brilliant, wealthy, proud, and impossibly haughty. All the qualities that had made audiences dislike Hepburn. But the story required Tracy Lord to be humbled, to fall literally and figuratively, to admit her flaws and become more human and accessible. Hepburn herself understood that the play was essentially an apology for her previous behavior. She told the screenwriter that he had to be careful the character wasn't too la-di-da, because a lot of people want to see me fall flat on my face. The Philadelphia Story gave them exactly what they wanted. It let them watch Hepburn be brought down before she was allowed to rise again. The play opened on Broadway in 1939 and became an immediate smash hit. Hepburn had retained the film rights through a deal with Howard Hughes, who purchased them for $30,000, and then essentially gave them to her. When it came time to sell the rights to Hollywood, Hepburn had learned from her previous powerlessness and demanded unprecedented control. She sold the rights to Louis B. Mayer at MGM for $250,000, with veto power over the cast, screenwriter, producer, and director. No actress had ever negotiated such control over a major studio production. Hepburn wanted Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy as her co-stars, but had to settle for Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart when Gable and Tracy weren't available. The film version of the Philadelphia Story premiered in 1940 and was exactly the hit Hepburn needed. The New York Times review specifically addressed her previous reputation. Someone was rudely charging a few years ago that Miss Hepburn was box office poison. The lady has competently answered that slur. The film earned 6 Academy Award nominations and won 2 Oscars. More importantly, the Philadelphia Story resurrected Hepburn's career and established her at MGM, where she would soon begin filming Woman of the Year with Spencer Tracy. The public relationship with Tracy would provide the perfect cover for her private life, allowing her to continue living as she wanted while presenting an image that audiences could embrace. The comeback demonstrated Hepburn's business acumen, her willingness to adapt without completely compromising her essential self, and her understanding of how to manipulate public perception. She had learned that she couldn't simply reject all conventions without consequences, but she had also proven that she could recover from even catastrophic career disasters through careful planning and strategic choices. Hepburn maintained her double life successfully for decades, becoming increasingly respected and beloved as she aged, while her actual private life remained hidden behind carefully constructed barriers. She won 3 more Academy Awards after the Philadelphia Story, worked steadily until she was in her 80s, and became an icon of independence and strength to multiple generations of women. But the secrets she guarded so carefully throughout her life began to emerge after her death in 2003. Scotty Bowers published his memoir in 2012, nearly a decade after Hepburn died, finally revealing the arrangements he had made for her and the true nature of the Tracy relationship. Liz Smith confirmed the accounts of Hepburn's relationships with women in the subsequent documentary. Biographers who had spent years carefully dancing around the truth in their books could finally speak more openly about what they had discovered, but couldn't publish while Hepburn was alive. The recorded conversation between Hepburn and John Ford was released, revealing the depth of emotion between them that neither had ever publicly acknowledged. The cumulative effect of these revelations was to paint a picture of someone who had spent her entire life performing, not just on screen, but in every interaction with the public. The independent, self-sufficient Katherine Hepburn, who lived by her own rules and didn't care what anyone thought, was itself a carefully constructed persona designed to conceal even more fundamental truths.
Now you're so tall and turn up your hair. You must remember you're almost a young lady. No, I'm not.
The double life had begun with Tom's death, when a 13-year-old girl pledged to live for 2 people, and it had continued until her death at 96. She had worn her brother's birthday as her own for 7 decades. She had dressed in pants and masculine clothing while maintaining romances that made her appear heterosexual. She had sacrificed genuine passion with John Ford for the safety of the arrangement with Spencer Tracy. Every choice had been calculated to allow her maximum freedom while protecting her career and reputation. The Tracy relationship was the masterpiece of this lifelong deception. It explained why she never married, justified her independent lifestyle, provided cover for her actual romantic interests, and gave audiences the love story they wanted without requiring her to actually live it. In her later years, Hepburn dropped occasional hints about the truth, making comments that revealed more than they concealed to those who were paying attention. The Alice B. Toklas reference, the statement about living as a man rather than a woman, the acknowledgement that people in California thought she was queer, all of these were breadcrumbs left by someone who perhaps wanted the truth to eventually be known, but couldn't afford to reveal it during her lifetime. The tragedy of Katherine Hepburn's life wasn't that she had to hide who she was. It was that she did it so successfully that the myth she created became more real than the truth. Generations of women celebrated her independence and strength without knowing that much of what they were celebrating was a performance designed to protect secrets that could have destroyed her. Hepburn lived to be 96 years old, dying on June 29, 2003, at her home in Connecticut. She had outlived Spencer Tracy by 36 years, John Ford by 30 years, and most of the people who knew the truth about her private life. She had won 4 Academy Awards, starred in over 50 films, and become a legend of American cinema. But she died still keeping her brother's birthday as her own, still living the double life she had created at age 13, still protecting the secrets that had required a lifetime of careful performance to maintain. The pledge she had made to Tom in 1921, that he would live in her heart and mind as long as she lived, had been fulfilled. Only in death could Katherine Hepburn finally stop living for 2 people and rest as herself alone. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye.